If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
Dr. Raquel Butler is our guest today again on Horse Chat. She's been here 5 times. This is her 6th chat with me, so I'm looking forward to this. Now, if you don't know Dr. Raquel Butler, go back, have a listen to a couple of the chats and just find out, that the work that she does, and she does quite a lot of work sort of like on behalf of the horses. She's worried about finding the right type of body worker for you if you're looking for a body worker, and equine injury rehabilitation. She also thinks about if your horse is behaving badly, and gives you options that may not be behaviour related, but more to do with the horse communicating and telling you something about themselves. And today we're going to talk about the benefits of stretching your horse. But look, before we do that, I'd just like to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by International Horse College, and horse welfare and safety are of utmost importance to us at International Horse College, which is why we've included them in our value statements. Within our wide variety of horse courses, we utilise methods that promote safe and humane methods of interaction between horses and humans, supporting only safe methods of educating riders, handlers and trainers. Have a look now at the online courses at internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. Now, Raquel, we're going to talk about benefits of stretching your horse. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you today?
Yeah, good. I know that we all do a lot of stretching and people recommend it. So for those people who maybe don't, think about stretching the horses or haven't sort of come across this, I think it's going to be really, and even people that do regular stretches, just to know the benefits and how it's going to improve things. But starting just with the relationship of your horse, how does we always want to have a better relationship with our horse, but how does that relationship with our horse, can that be improved by stretching?
Yeah, I think stretching your horse is a really good way to improve your relationship, because often, we're asking them to do things, to work, to, give us specific kind of things, and there's not always a reward based in that, like a bit of a scratch or depends what type of training you're doing. But when you're doing stretching with your horse, often there is a reward in terms of carrots or licorice or, some feed-based reward. And so then it makes it quite a positive experience for the horse from that perspective. I mean, some horses are a little bit treat motivated, and so it can be a bit challenging with those types of horses to use treats because they'll do anything for the treat. But there's ways that you can kind of, still reward them, and they feel better after doing the stretching. So they associate that, potentially with the way that it feels during the stretch, and that it's not painful. It's all a positive experience. So I think it's a great way to improve that ground relationship with your horse.
All right. Now, just the fascia, how does this influence, and what's the fascia anyway? So, what are we talking about there? If you can explain that, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, so fascia is a pretty cool part of the horse, and it's now kind of thought to be its own organ. It covers everything in the body. So it covers under the skin, it covers all of the muscles, all of the individual muscle fibres, the nerves, the blood vessels, the bones, and then it goes internally and covers all of the internal organs as well. So it's like a cling film-like layer that's covering all of those things, but it needs to be able to slide so that the things that it's covering can work optimally. It's also, there's more and more research being done in regards to fascia and its importance and its composition. And the composition of it is quite highly innervated by nerves. So therefore it's important from that kind of perspective of also of proprioception, so the body's awareness of where it is in space. It's also really important that that fascia is hydrated so that the structures that it's covering can work optimally and that they can be supported effectively by the fascia as well. The other thing is that when fascia is not being used adequately or when there's been underlying injuries, it can actually have an increase in the pain receptors within the fascia. So stretching can really help normalise those receptors. It can help improve the hydration of the fascia. It can help to reduce any adhesions that are, sticky bits within the fascia that are occurring, and ensure that it's appropriately aligned so that you're getting proper transmission of forces through that fascia. So, yeah, really, I think stretching is mostly working on the fascia, but it depends how you stretch as to the influence that it's going to have on the fascia.
And you talked about proprioception before. Can you just go a little deeper there and, what is proprioception and why is it important? Just talk to us a little more about that.
Yeah, so proprioception's really important if you're going to ride a horse. You really want to know that that horse knows where its legs are. And proprioception is basically the horse's awareness of where the limbs are in space. So, we don't have to think every time we're walking where we're putting our feet. We don't have to look down and watch exactly where we put our feet all the time to prevent us from falling over. We can even walk in the dark, with the lights off, and we can feel for things, and we're aware of maybe where a step is in the middle of the night. And so that's proprioception. It's that awareness. And when a horse has good proprioception, they'll step over poles without knocking them. They can step through obstacles without getting their legs all caught up or getting all anxious about it. And it makes them much safer, especially if you're, say, jumping your horse. You don't want them to leave a leg behind on the jump if they're not aware of where that leg is in space. So proprioception's, really important for those reasons. And there's a lot of proprioceptors in the body that are influenced during stretching. So there's the proprioceptors in fascia. Then there's the proprioceptors within muscles. So there's the Golgi tendon organ, which is where the tendon is joining into the muscle, and that's a stretch receptor. So that's an awareness of how much that muscle is under tension, and it gives feedback to the brain. There's also the stretch receptors within the muscles themselves. And then there's other mechanoreceptors around joints as well, so telling the body, where a joint is in space. Is it flexed too much? Is it extended too much? Is it putting pressure on that joint capsule? So all of those proprioceptors are influenced during stretching, and the stretching will help to make sure that they are working adequately, so long as you're doing your stretches correctly and not over stretching them or putting them under too much tension where you're getting, kind of a bracing response from the body. And so that's how stretching can really help improve proprioception. It helps to normalise those proprioceptors in all of those areas that I've just talked about.
I'm just thinking now about our listeners that are competitive riders, So typically if someone's going to ride and improve a horse, it'll be okay. Where, say with a dressage horse, we might start working on collection. We'll start with shoulder in, or the jumping horse, we might set up some grids, or, even a horse to gallop, we might take them through a few short bursts or a longer one. But how does this complement what the riders are doing? How does that stretching improve the athletic ability or just the flexibility and the range of motion in the horse? Is it a complement? Should we do it instead? Or if we're already riding them, do we still need to do it? Can you go into a little bit more detail about that? For the horses who are out there competing, what can we do?
Yeah, so the horses that are out there competing, it's probably even more important than any other horse, to ensure that you're supporting their performance. And what we've got to remember is that, some of those exercises that you mentioned depending how far along they are in their competition life or what level they're competing at, is putting stress and strain through the body. And it also depends, maybe the horse has some underlying sacroiliac issues, or, has maybe had some previous muscle tears or other injuries throughout its life. And so stretching, especially after hard work or a new, when something new has been added in, or the day after they've been to a competition, or directly after if you have the time, is super valuable. And it's going to make sure that any kind of underlying niggles that could, end up becoming an injury or predisposing to an injury are recognised or, even rectified through doing some stretches. And so I think it's super important for the performance horse to be a part of their regular regime. Riding doesn't generally create stretch as such, like it creates activation, different sorts of muscle contractions, but, I guess in your lateral work you're getting some flexibility and some stretch, but it's still within the horse's kind of comfortable area, and we want that to be optimal for the horse, not be restricted by anything, that we might not be recognising. So, really, really important part of a competition horse's regime, and really beneficial to actually improve their competitive performance, improve their flexibility in the exercises that you're asking them to perform, and improve their range of motion. So, for example, say dressage and extended trot. So improving the strength at the stretch, the end of that extended trot, and making sure they're strong and they're not losing that strength, and making sure they've got adequate range of motion to get back legs over a cross-country fence or a show jump without knocking the rails. So, it's really beneficial to your competition horse and should be a part of every competition horse's regime.
Okay, I just want you to go a little bit more into the strength. I'm thinking of the Olympic ideals of stronger, faster, higher. So the strength, it seems like such a relaxing, passive sort of thing. How does the stretching improve the strength of the horse? Can you go a little bit more deeper there?
Yeah, so what we want in our horses is that we want strength at stretch. And so in a lot of motion, or some of the motions, they're going to the end degree of their range of motion. So racing in the gallop, they're putting their body through a very excessive range of motion, and even, landing a jump, and they're landing on those tendons. And we want the muscles that are supporting those tendons to be strong. And so if you've got a muscle that's supporting a tendon and it's tight, or it's already in a state of, say, partial contraction because it's been, worked really hard, then on that landing or on that end of the gallop or at the end of that extended trot, they're not going to have that strength. The muscle is not able to work optimally. And so then you start ending up with, tendon injuries, or, maybe worse, maybe you end up with a fractured sesamoid or some other kind of injury breakdown because the muscles weren't supporting the lower limbs adequately. So by stretching, we'll just talk about limbs, for example, by stretching the forelimb and stretching those muscles that are connected to those tendons, you're making sure that the fascia around them is hydrated. You're making sure that they're not kind of stuck in a partial contraction all the time. You're making sure the blood flow is adequate to those muscles, and you're making sure that, I can't remember if I said the fascia, but the fascia around them is actually allowing those muscles to slide, and then you're going to have strength to support those things. And it's also been shown in research that stretching does generally just improve strength.
Yeah. As you're going through that, I'm thinking, yep, that makes sense. Now, I've got something more as a rider. So we know as humans we're usually right or left-handed. There's not too many people that are really and truly ambidextrous. And with our horses, we have stiff and hollow sides. Okay, so can stretching influence the symmetry of the horse? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the benefits, and I guess this goes back to the relationship with your horse as well, is that you might have recognised there's some symmetry things when you're riding the horse, like they might have more trouble with, a certain lateral movement, like shouldering one way compared to the other way, or, be stiffer to give to one leg or something like that. And then recognising that in a bit more detail on the ground through your stretching is even more valuable. So you might, especially when you first start to stretch a horse, you will recognise that there's a more difficult side to stretch and an easier side for them to stretch. And you might recognise there's the one forelimb's easier to come forward, one forelimb's easier to go back, and vice versa. So being able to utilise stretching to recognise the asymmetry in your horse, but also it then gives you a guide of when it's actually improving. So horses do generally have a stiffer side and a more flexible side, and as you said, we do too. But to help them support us, and I mean, we do it as we should do it ourselves as riders as well, and try to improve our symmetry. But the more that we can improve the horse's symmetry, then the more we're helping them to perform and improve in their performance. So, I think that stretching from a symmetry perspective is really important, and I've seen huge improvements in horses in their symmetry through a stretching regime and a mindful groundwork as well. It also will help with any hoof balance issues. So in terms of symmetry too, you're stretching them. And if they've had any injuries, people often forget that when a horse has had an injury, they focus on the injured leg, but the horse will often be taking more weight on the uninjured leg. And so in taking more weight on that, so for example, a wound on hock, and so you're really focused on that wound healing, that leg's been swollen, focused on reducing the scar, but then you forget that over the 3 months or 6 months maybe that wound's taken to heal, they've been taking more weight on the other hind leg. And so the sacroiliacs become restricted and the muscles have become tighter, and they've lost range of motion in that limb. So it's really beneficial once they can weight bear on the sore limb to make sure you're stretching both. And I've had it where I've said to a client, this leg's we've got a problem in this leg, and then I forgot to tell them, you need to stretch both, and they've come back and I'm like, the bad leg's great, but now the other leg's a bit stiff. So we've always got to make sure that we don't forget the good legs, and that even when we're stretching a problem or we're addressing a problem, that we're still stretching the horse in whatever way it can, kind of comfortably, and whether that's just a dynamic range of motion, just picking up the other limb if they can't weight there for very long on the injured one, just picking up the uninjured one and just putting it through a range of motion. That will be enough, to help and help with their rehab from that perspective.
Is there anything we need to worry about though? Is there any sort of pain? If the horse, is it going to relieve the pain, or are there any exercises that are dangerous or any sort of pain that we should avoid when we're doing stretching? If it can relieve the pain, that's great, but anything we should avoid there too?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is to always listen to the horse. So, they will guide you in what they can cope with. So, for example, I have a little pony, and we've been going through like a rehab program, and she's got lots of wear and tear. She's 14, and she was struggling to weight bear on her left hind. So I would then have to, whatever I did with the right hind, I just did it for a shorter period of time, but I'd have to do it maybe a bit more often. But she would tell me when she couldn't do any more. But over time, that's improved, and it's nearly even now in terms of her being able to hold the right leg up and go through all of her stretches while weight bearing on her left leg without going into an abnormal posture or pulling the leg out of my hands. So I think it's very important to recognise that you don't do the same stretching with every horse, that you tailor the stretching program to the horse. And you often, if you haven't done any stretching before, then you start with dynamic stretching, which basically means a continuous motion with the stretching rather than a hold. And so you build that up over time. But the other thing to realise is that stretching will help to reduce pain, because as we talked about before, you're influencing the fascia, and fascia is often a big contributor to pain. And when over time, when the fascia has been moving or when you've got a painful area, you actually get more pain receptors in the fascia. And so the stretching, gentle stretching, can actually, turn those pain receptors into happy receptors and reduce the pain. So I don't know if you find this yourself, but I find if I've been sitting down all the time and I haven't been moving, and I've had a few days where I haven't done any exercise, then I'm starting to get really sore in, problem areas. And then just a bit of gentle yoga will make a huge difference to my pain and usually completely relieve it. So we've got to look at it like that for horses as well. Like, they get stiff, they have problems, all of them have some problems. And so keeping them moving in a healthy way and making sure that it's kind of symmetrical and balanced and knowing what it was like last time is really going to help to relieve pain and reduce restriction.
Okay, so the whole, of them getting stiff and you're trying to give them the work, does the stretching then enhance performance and I suppose reduce the injury risk or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It enhances performance if we come back to improving strength and flexibility and symmetry. So the improvement in performance kind of comes back to all the things that we've discussed. So improving proprioception, improving range of motion, the flexibility, the strength, the symmetry, and relieving pain. All of that's going to enhance your performance. And therefore, if you're kind of helping with all of those things, then you're going to reduce your injury risk. But the other aspect of that reduces your injury risk is, if you're stretching your horse regularly, you will know what's normal for your horse. So then if one day you're stretching it and they don't want to give you that front limb, or they, don't stretch it how they normally stretch it, or they pull it back, or they kick at you, then you'll know, something's not quite right there. I need to see if I can sort it out, and if not, I need to call the vet or the body worker and figure out what's going on here before it actually becomes, a problem. Whereas you might not, if you weren't doing your stretching, you might not have recognised that, and then all of a sudden your horse has injured itself and you think, that was an accident. But meanwhile, the body had been having little things happen that, you just weren't recognising in your daily work. The other way that it reduces your injury risk is it reduces fatigue. So it reduces muscle fatigue, because, as I said before, if you've got muscles that are functioning optimally and not in, say, a slight state of contraction, then they're not going to get as fatigued because they're not, already kind of working at a point, and then you're adding more work onto them. They're relaxed and then they work. Everything's working effectively and efficiently, and then they relax. So you need to get a much improved reduction of fatigue onset. And so that's really going to enhance your performance, but also a lot of injuries occur due to fatigue. So that's really important. And then if we do the stretches kind of, post any hard exercise, then we're going to reduce just post-exercise stiffness and aid in their recovery, aid in the improving the blood flow, making sure that fascia is hydrated, and that's going to significantly improve their recovery. And then with all of that, they'll be more balanced in their body and their mind, and more happy to continue work. So it's a win-win.
Perfect. And what about, sometimes we get different body workers and we've got to spend certain time doing other things. Does this reduce the work that we do through the bodywork sessions or increase, or tell us a little bit more, because you've talked quite generally about getting body workers to see that we get the right one. How does that work? And is this something that all body workers would use as a complementary, I suppose, treatment, to help their horse? What's the general alignment with body workers and stretching?
Yeah, so, every horse should have some degree of body work. That's my belief. It's just like taking it as a mechanic. It's an essential part of owning a horse, and especially an essential part of competing a horse. And so, obviously, that can be expensive. Part of owning a horse, everything to do with owning a horse is expensive. So, but if you have a program of stretching in place, and I've seen this time and time again with my good clients, when they do the exercises that I've prescribed for them and they follow that protocol, I will come back and the horse is, 10 times better, 100 times better than what it was before, because they've done those exercises. And generally it will reduce how often I need to go back and see that horse, because they're doing those exercises. So it actually reduces your requirement for a body worker. So I still would recommend that you have them out every, 6 to 8 weeks. There's some horses I see 2 or 3 times a year, and that's sufficient. But if you're doing your stretches, then you significantly reduce all of those restrictions and things that need to be treated by a body worker. So you're really helping to maintain your horse yourself. And it doesn't have to be like all the time. You don't have to be stretching every day, and you don't have to spend hours and hours on it. It can just be twice a week after a hard session. Even once a week can make a huge difference. But, twice a week, go through your stretching regime after they've had a session, or you might have a designated day that you do stretching, and just incorporate it as part of your horse's training program. And, it will significantly reduce your need for a body worker.
Well, it sounds like it's going to improve the overall health and welfare of the horse. Is that right? Like for all horses. If you were going to, say, break it down and say 3 or 4 points how it improves the overall health and welfare, what would you say? What are the main things? Just if you can summarise, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's going to improve your horse's overall mental well-being. So you'll find a horse that, you're stretching, that you're improving their symmetry, and improving their symmetry improves their relaxation and their mental well-being. So a more straight horse, a more balanced horse will be a happier horse. And also you're having that interaction with them as well. So I think that also helps them mentally too. And then there's like the obvious physical improvements in their health and welfare. So, the physical improvements being improved strength, improved proprioception, improved flexibility, range of motion, improved reduction in pain. So all of those things are having a huge impact on their physical well-being. And, I think when you think about that, it's not just muscles and fascia, you're having an influence on their organs and stuff as well, because of that continuation of fascia throughout the body. So it's not just the area that you're stretching that you're benefiting at that time. You're benefiting any connections to that area, which is really the whole horse. And then physiologically, you're also having benefits in terms of altering receptor feedback, altering pain feedback, altering the proprioceptors, and so you're having an influence, on a chemical, physiological level as well. So yeah, it's pretty powerful, and it's pretty beneficial for you to add into your everyday training regime.
Perfect. I think everyone's going to start to, even if it's not every day, but certainly incorporating stretching into their regular routine. I think there's quite a few listeners will be going, oh, there really are some benefits here of incorporating that. And as you say, it can just be a couple of times a week and just incorporate it into what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've been along to the talk, for the local adult riding club, and, a few of the people who implemented just the basic spinal stretches, said how much improvement they'd noticed in their horse. So that's not getting, it's not kind of getting a bodywork or anything which would add to that, but just doing that themselves, they noticed an improvement in their horse. So, yeah, the power is in your hand. But I will say, actually, just be very mindful about how you stretch your horse. So don't, if you've never stretched your horse before, don't just go in and start stretching and holding for, 30 to 60 seconds and, forcing them to do those stretches. Like, you go in very dynamically, you just show them the stretch and let them come out of it, and show them and let them come out of it, and keep it moving initially until they get more flexibility. Otherwise, they can brace, and if they're bracing against what you're doing, so if you've got a forelimb, you're holding a forelimb into a stretch and you can feel the horse kind of pulling back a little bit or pushing down on you, then they're bracing and you're not getting the full benefit from that stretch. So it should be comfortable for you without injuring yourself, and it should be comfortable for the horse and relaxing for the horse. So, yeah, just be aware not to force the stretch or not to feel brace in the horse. You want to feel flow.
All right. Look, I think that's wonderful. I'm sure you've converted quite a few people, and they'll be incorporating that into their regular routine. But Raquel, if people need to contact you about this, if they've got any questions, they want to go into a bit more depth, what's the best way? Is it email, phone number, or either?
Yeah, so my email is, I can't remember which one I've given you in the past, butler@csu.edu.au.
Yeah, that's the one we put on the bottom of each page. So if people don't even have, can't write that down, just go into horsechats.com, search for Raquel or search for Butler, and you'll find those details. Now, did you want to say your phone number as well?
Yeah, my phone number, you better have to message me, 0435 813 505. And then I also, as well as working at CSU, I also have a Facebook page, Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics. And sometimes I post, little bits of stuff on there as well. So, yeah, there's a few ways to get in touch with me.
Okay. All right, Raquel, thank you for coming on. We will talk to you very soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Glenys.
Bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.